Good evening, and welcome to this forum for the Huntington Woods City Election. Today is October 10th, 2017. This forum will be featuring the candidates who have filed for the Huntington Woods City Commission. There are 3 candidates for 2 seats. You vote for 2 candidates for a 4-year term. The sponsor for this forum is the League of Women Voters, Oakland area. I am Neil Zeckman, a member of the League of Women Voters. I am not a resident of the city of Huntington Woods. The League of Women Voters is a trusted, national, nonpartisan political organization. Our members do the hands-on work to safeguard democracy. While we never endorse a candidate, we are directly involved in shaping the important issues that keep our community strong. As a League of Women Voters member, I have the opportunity to contribute in a leadership role, such as this one, that has great impact on local, state, and even national issues. If you're interested in learning about how you can make a similar impact, I would encourage you to pick up some of the League's information available here tonight, or visit our website at lwv.org. The League of Women Voters does not endorse any candidate or political party. Views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, and the sponsors take no responsibility. The format for this forum has been established by the League of Women Voters. We ask that the audience remain silent during the forum. Please turn off all cell phones. We ask that candidates answer the questions with their views only, and that they not interrupt another candidate. The candidates will be answering questions submitted by the audience and screened for duplication and appropriateness by Susan Liebetro and Lenore Littman. Paige Judy Bateman will be circulating with paper and pencils for your questions. Please turn your questions in to the page. The format is as follows. All candidates will be given 1 minute for an opening statement in alphabetical order. Closing statements will be 1 minute in reverse order. Candidates will have 1 minute to answer each question in rotation unless extended by myself. All candidates will be allowed equal time to answer questions. Our timer is Sue Bernstein. The candidates, in alphabetical order, are Jules Olsman, Joe Rozelle, and David C. Sloan. We will begin the 1-minute opening statements with Mr. Olsman.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Jules Olsman. I'd like to begin by thanking the League for sponsoring this, thanking my wife Barbara for all her participation in not only everything involved with this effort this fall, but for everything that goes on with the city, with me, and with our colleagues. I also want to thank all of my colleagues on the City Commission, Joe, Allison, Bob, and Jeff Jenks, for their strong support and endorsement for my reelection and Joe's reelection. I have many successes to talk to you about tonight with regard to the city. Can't do it in 1 minute, so I'll space them out over the evening. We have a great city. We are the kind of city that other cities only hope they can be. I can assure you of that. I can also assure you that our city commission operates in a highly ethical, transparent manner at all times and in full compliance with the Michigan Open Meetings Act. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. Mr. Rozelle.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to thank the League and also our own Huntington Woods resident, Judy Bateman, for organizing this evening's forum. I'd also like to thank those of you in the audience and those of you watching at home for taking time to learn about the candidates. I was both honored and humbled when you elected me to the City Commission in 2015. I believe that with our mayor and the rest of my colleagues on the City Commission, we have a great team working for residents. I'm seeking re-election because I enjoy helping residents with their questions or concerns and helping to guide our city's future. We have a great city made up of great people. And I promise, if re-elected, to continue to serve as your voice on the commission for another term. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. And Mr. Sloan.
Good evening. I want to thank the league and my wife, Kathy. I'm David Sloan. I'm a retired attorney and business owner. I'm a member of the Huntington Woods Environmental Advisory Committee and the Oakland County Senior Advisory Council. I'm fortunate to live in the most desirable community in the area, to raise my family here in the best location, excellent schools, and beautiful homes. I would like to be your commissioner and your representative. The City Commission is a conservator of what you, the residents, have put into this city.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. We will now begin the question segment of our forum. Most questions will have a 1-minute time limit, and we will begin with Mr. Olsman. Oh, yes.
You want me to throw out the first question?
Thank you. Mr. Olsman, what are your plans for addressing our sewer infrastructure to limit flooding?
Thank you. Actually, before the catastrophic flood of 2014, the city had actually had a plan for trying to keep sewers maintained after the flooding and after, or the big flood, if you want to call it, which of course was beyond what any municipality or any entity could control. We have begun a very aggressive sewer mapping project that will look at the entire city's sewer system and look for any areas that need repair, tree roots or anything like that, that will prevent flooding from occurring in ordinary rainfall situations. Nothing is going to prevent flooding in the catastrophe that occurred in 2014, where we had 5 inches of water over about a 2-hour period of time that caused billions of dollars in damage and flooded tens of thousands of homes.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. Same question to Mr. Rozell.
Thank you. Well, we just finished, as my colleague has indicated, we just finished televising and cleaning, starting at Coolidge and working all the way to Woodward. And we did certainly clear a lot of debris and tree roots from the sewer line. And the good news is that this is going to be part of a regular maintenance program. The commission has divided the city into sections, and going forward, every 4 years, the sewer line in front of your home will have a camera and auger run through it to be cleaned. Is it helpful? I'd say look at about a month and a half ago. 700 Berkeley homes had 3 to 4 feet of sewage in their basement. Not a single Huntington Woods home had a sewer backup. So we are moving in the right direction. We're waiting on the engineering report to come back, and then the commission will meet and determine which parts of the system will need repair or replacement. And so this is a priority. It was a commitment 2 years ago that I made to you that I would tackle this. I've been working with my colleagues and our mayor on doing that, and I'm very pleased that we're moving in the right direction.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. Mr. Sloan.
As a member of the Environment Advisory Committee, that is my #1 project. We need a variety of flood control solutions in the city. We need to promote rain gardens on both the city and residential properties. We need to promote pervious pavements, pervious areas where the water can infiltrate down instead of going off into the street. We need a variety of different areas, natural plants, native plants where the roots go all the way down. But all of these will help to control our flooding and help the residents. I want to have a whole program where we involve all the residents in getting involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. We'll begin the next question with Mr. Rozell. What are your plans for addressing water rates going forward?
Well, 2 years ago, I promised that we would begin a program of purchasing water during off-peak times at a lower rate and utilizing that during peak times. We've done that. And our last rate increase from the Great Lakes Water Authority in Huntington Woods was 1%. The average was 6%. Some communities saw double digits. So the 1% increase on water and the 2.5% on sewer that came from the county for sanitary sewer treatment was 3.5%. We passed on 3.5% to the residents, not a single markup. So our water rates are 1/6 the average that other communities saw as far as an increase. And that's because the commission is implementing programs to try to bring down what we have to pay to the Great Lakes Water Authority. The new authority is sort of in its infancy, and I think we'll see as we move forward, rates will continue to increase from them, but we will pass on only the minimum necessary to residents. So that's how I plan on addressing that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. Same question to Mr. Sloan.
I think we should try the situation that Pleasant Ridge is doing. Pleasant Ridge's water rates have gone down 11%. What they are doing is looking at each property to see how pervious the area is, how much rainwater goes into the storm and how much is into the street and how much is absorbed in the property. And their water rates have gone down 11%. That's something to look at. And also, I would like to talk to the residents and tell them to monitor their water. You leave the house, put down the water meter number, come back in 12 hours, check the water meter number, see if you have a leak. Because a lot of times there are leaks and you don't know, they're slow, silent leaks. And that could be another help for the residents, and these two may be a way to lower costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan and Mr. Olsman.
Well, when you have to buy your water from somebody else, Huntington Woods, like all other cities, is somewhat held hostage to rates charged by other authorities, and it's not like something we can just go and create our own water system. It's a complex regional problem. What we do have, for what it's worth, and I don't know that it necessarily contributes here, but we have a very good relationship with the city of Detroit. We have a very good relationship with Gary Brown, who the former city councilman, who's the head of the Detroit Water Sewage Treatment Department. I invited him, and he came and addressed the Huntington Woods City Commission in 2009 on a variety of issues, and this was before the bankruptcy. It had to do with who was going to take over the Detroit Water Sewage Treatment System and so forth. But it's hard for one small city to control what we pay for water. But I don't have a lot to add to what Mr. Rozell had to say about it, because I mean that's about the best we can do as a city commission. We can't force the city of Detroit to offer us a better deal on water.
All right, thank you, Mr. Olsman. We'll begin the next question with Mr. Sloan. Why was there no after-action report after the 2014 flood? And what are the contingency plans for the next flood and next power outage?
I've been wondering about that myself. I've asked the Water Resource Commission Department in Oakland County, and they have not issued a specific report. I asked the city for a report. The city has not done their own report. We are waiting for the results of the cleaning of the sewers and the televising, but it's now been 3 years, and we have not seen any report on what's going on. So I cannot answer that question, but I feel the city should at least do part of the report, do a sewer cleaning, televising from Coolidge to Scotia. Check it out, give a report. Go Scotia to Wyoming, and then go Scotia to Woodward. But that's not the case. They are doing the entire city. So we'll have to wait and see what their report is.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Mr. Olsman.
Thank you. We rely on a professional engineering firm to give us advice about this. You know, we have 2,300 homes in this city. This is, for most people, the largest investment that they have in their lives. And it's not going to rely on this, going to rely on that. We have a professional engineering firm that's doing the mapping and doing the inspection of the sewers. The project is almost done. The question is now, what are the repairs? What is it going to cost so that we can go to the residents and say, this is what we're going to have? this is, when you talk about the events of 2014, that's a regional problem. We visited the George W. Kuhn Drain in December of 2015. It goes down, I believe, 8 stories into the ground, and they took us on a complete tour. And on August 11th, 2014, they were concerned that the water was going to come out the top of the drain onto the street. So there's very little that anybody can do to prevent that type of an occurrence, and it's going to take a long time, I assume, for somebody to come up with an ultimate conclusion about what all happened besides the extreme quantity of water.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. And Mr. Rozell.
Thank you. As my colleague indicated, we did go out and tour the George W. Kuhn Drain and did discuss with the county ultimately what happened. The county's not going to release a report because they're involved in a lawsuit right now. So there's no way they're going to release a document that's going to place them in jeopardy in the middle of their court case. So we're not going to see a report from the county anytime soon. Locally, that report is in the works. Our engineering firm is actively reviewing tapes to look at various parts of the system and determine what needs repair, what needs replacement. Our power grid, as far as your comment on the power outage, our power grid, our power infrastructure is one of the worst of the 50 states. And so, ask the folks on LaSalle that, their power goes out almost every other week, and that, we've been working with to try to get answers from DTE. So we're doing what we can. We have old infrastructure, an old power grid, and a old sanitary and storm sewer system. So we're doing everything we can, and we'll continue to push the county and push our engineers to produce those reports.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. We'll begin the next question with Mr. Olsman. Is Rackham safe from development? What are the plans moving forward?
Thank you. Rackham is subject to deed restrictions, which many of you will remember were the subject of a lawsuit a number of years ago, where we successfully defeated an attempt by the former mayor of the city of Detroit to sell the golf course out from underneath us to private developers. That was before the recession hit. I'll leave it to you to imagine what Rackham would look like today if that had happened. I have been actively working for the past 2 years with the city of Detroit. There's a committee that's evaluating Rackham and the city's 3 other golf courses to tell the city of Detroit what they can really afford. Rackham, I believe, is safe from development. My plan for Rackham, or my suggested plan for Rackham, would be to have a manager come in that's long-term and stable, who has the incentive to invest in the golf course and make the improvements that it needs. Rackham is an extremely profitable golf course for the city of Detroit, and it's a major asset to the city of Huntington Woods, both in terms of its aesthetic value and its economic value.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. Mr. Rozell.
Rackham is safe. The Supreme Court has upheld the deed restriction, and so I am confident that it will remain a golf course. I think the critical element is that we continue to build our relationship with Detroit to make sure that they have a company in there that's able to run and maintain the golf course and keep it up to acceptable standard. A while back, the mayor and I met with one of the Rackham heirs to discuss lifting a deed restriction on the prohibition of alcohol sales there because the clubhouse is crumbling and no one is willing to invest in the clubhouse unless they can hold events there. And so we're actively working to try and see if there is a way to continue to improve Rackham and bring events and organizations in, and most importantly, keep it in great condition and operational. So the residents can rest assured that Rackham is safe and that the commission is very, very serious about making sure that it stays in nice condition.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. Mr. Sloan.
I've done the historical research on Rackham. I went back to all the deed restrictions in the 1800s to see how Rackham has evolved, and there are certainly many heirs who would have to be involved in Rackham to do any kind of development. Perhaps we could have the residents do some cross-country in Rackham in the winter. Maybe use it something for some other purposes, which might be nice, other recreation purposes. But I think Rackham is safe, and I think It is a great golf course. I remember playing when I was a child on Rackham's course when I had a shorter golf club when I was living here in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. For the fifth question, we have two questions from the audience that are on a very similar subject. So I'm going to ask you both questions. I'm going to ask the timer to allow 2-minute answers for these questions, please. And we'll start with Mr. Rozell. First question, what is the city's pension liability? And is the city facing a growing financial crisis? And the second related question, what are your plans for addressing the city's pension funding obligations?
We are not facing any type of financial crisis. Our credit rating is AA+, which is unheard of for a city of our size. So I'll put that out there. Our pension funding is something that I promised to address 2 years ago when I was campaigning for election. This was a problem that was created over decades, and it's not something that we're going to solve overnight. When I was first elected, the funding ratio was in the 50s. We're now 60% funded on pensions. We've met with our public safety officers union, and through collective bargaining, we're able to create a new classification and get them to agree to a cap on overtime. So we have addressed the problem, the source of the problem that was putting us out of whack with our pension funding level. In the last 2 years, we've funded $1.5 million above what we were required to contribute by the actuary. And our funding level would have been higher than 60%, but in meeting with the Municipal Employees Retirement System, they made several key changes in assumptions. The mortality table, recognizing that folks are living longer, meaning we're going to be paying pensions for a longer period of time. They lowered the estimated rate of return on those pension investments by 1.5%, so that gave us a hit as well. But despite some of these assumption changes, we have still taken that funding level to 60%. And we are working on a plan to be at 100% in the next 5 years. So it is something that we're committed to solving. This is not unique to Huntington Woods. Cities are in a lot worse shape than we are. But we recognize this as an issue, and we're working toward resolving that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. Mr. Sloan.
The pension issue is a very serious issue. The pension issue, the amount that we have funded can address the amount we pay in interest on bonds and other items because it hits the bottom line in our balance sheets and in our income statements. The city of Pleasant Ridge has on the ballot in November a millage for the pensions for the police. It is that serious of an issue. And I'm concerned that the city of Huntington Woods may have to do the same thing too. The plan to address financial situations, we have other issues. We have very large attorney fees, we have large engineering fees, we have large fees for planning companies. This is something we need to address in all of the financial parts of our city. And I plan to address each economic issue in the city, in each department. We need to take a look at all of the expenses, and the pension is part of it. And that is a serious issue, since we do have a directed, some directed pensions and some non-directed pensions. And this is a serious issue, and I expect to get very much involved in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Mr. Olsman.
Yes, thank you. When I was first elected, when I started in 2009, our former city manager in this room put up a PowerPoint presentation that was called Walking in the Rain, and it was a detailed analysis of what was facing our city based on the recession that we were mired in the midst of at that time. So I'm going to ask the residents who are here and the residents that are home watching, tell me how many times the city of Huntington Woods came to you during that recession and said, we need more money, or we need a millage, or we can't make it on what we have. The answer is never. The city never once during that recession came to anyone and said, we need money, we can't do it. We cut, we pared, we knocked, we chipped, we did everything we could to reduce city services to a level that can keep the city going where the residents would never know it. Would never know it. You know why we know the residents never knew it and it was never a problem? We have had the highest increase in property values, among the highest increase in property values in Oakland County in the past several years. People don't buy houses and spend the kind of money that people are spending in our city if they think the city is financially unstable. Pension liabilities are a problem in every city in America, and they reflect promises made to people at different times in different economic situations. We have abominable revenue sharing in this state. We are 50 out of 50 states with respect to revenue sharing. So when you talk about what we owe and everything like that, sure we owe it. But that's not a gift to people. That's money that we owe for promises that were made to people that work for work that has already been performed. As Joe said, we're addressing it as best as we can with the tools available to us.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. We'll begin the next question with Mr. Sloan. There are currently several unfilled committee positions. How would you address this?
I feel the issue of the committees is one of movement of committee members from one committee to another. I would increase the amount of people on the committees. Last year, I attended all the committee interviews. Approximately 17 people were interviewed, and maybe a couple got on committees. These are people with expertise in development, in water issues, in planning issues. And we need to get our residents actively involved. A lot of people want to be involved, but they can't make it past the commission as far as being appointed to these committees. So I think we need to expand the committees. 14 people wanted to be on the planning commission and a number of others on other committees. So I think we need to expand the committees and get people involved. We have expertise in this city. And residents have amazing expertness. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Mr. Olsman.
Yes, thank you. We have 14 boards and commissions in the city of Huntington Woods. At the present time, that's 99 residents that serve for free, give of their time to assist our city. I have significant experience in organizations. I'm a past president of the Michigan Trial Lawyers. I'm a past chair of the negligence section of the State Bar of Michigan, and I currently sit as a member of the State Bar Board of Commissioners. These are large organizations. The State Bar is 43,000 lawyers. The trial lawyers are about 2,000, and the negligence section is about 1,500. In large organizations, you learn something about committees. Committees have to be functional. They have to be in a functional size. And our committees are just fine in terms of their size. In terms of getting people to serve, we usually have to go out and look for people and ask people to serve on boards and commissions, to come in and be willing to be interviewed for them. If people are busy in their own lives, and not everybody at every point in their life can come in and say, I'll serve on the planning commission. So our boards and commissions are just fine in terms of their size, and citizen representation is tremendous.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. Mr. Rozell.
Thank you. Expanding the size of committee sounds great, but the reality is the size of a lot of these committees is set in state law. The Planning Commission says, under the Zoning Enabling Act, the Planning Commission shall have X amount of members. The Zoning Board of Appeals, X amount of numbers. The Historic District Commission is set in state statute. The Board of Review is set in state statute. We have no authority to expand the size of these committees, or we'll be out of compliance with state law. Other committees that are advisory in nature, we could look at expanding, but the committees where there's the most interest, say the Planning Commission, someone who served on the Planning Commission, it takes a few years before you get up to speed. The term is 3 years. So just as someone gets up to speed in year 3, I'm not in favor of removing them from the planning commission. Our policy allows someone to serve 2 3-year terms on these various boards. I think that's fair. I've paid out of my own pocket to boost on Facebook these types of messages to generate citizen interest in these boards and commissions, aside from other avenues of communication. So we're certainly looking for folks, and I support it, but again, we're saddled by state law.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. Mr. Sloan? Oh, no, I started with
I can
Mr.
answer
Olson.
again, but I think
Oh, okay, sorry.
He has an answer before the question.
Okay, all right. I was on the wrong question, sorry. All right, so we'll begin this one with Mr. Olsman. Do you advocate the city passing an ordinance to require residents to make design changes for homes? All right, let me see. Do you advocate the city passing an ordinance to require residents to make, probably to file design changes for homes, I think is probably what they're asking.
Well, we already have that. I mean, depending on the size of whatever work is being done, you have to come to the city and you have to get a permit, and it has to go through the planning commissions, depending upon the size of the project that's being done. That's already the law in Huntington Woods. That's the way it's worked in the 41 years that I've been here. Every plan has to go, initially, they have to come see Hank Berry, and if, depending on the size, square foot area of what's being done, it has to go through planning. If the question is directed to house size and things like that, that's already part of our city's planning regulations and requirements. And every plan for like a new home or things like that has to go through the planning commission. I also sat on the planning commission for 6 years and the zoning board of appeals for 5. And I mean, this is a highly regulated area as it is. And the reason for that is to make sure that new construction, whether it be in the form of an addition or whether it be in the form of a new home, complies with the city's zoning and building requirements.
Thank you. Mr. Rozell?
Thank you. I think this is, as Commissioner Olsman's indicated, I think this is already covered in our current ordinance. I served on planning for 6 years and the zoning board of appeals for 6 years before being elected to the city commission. And depending on the size, certain additions or new, all new homes do have to come before the planning commission for review. Certain additions that are under a certain size don't, and I think there's probably good reason for that. So we're not placing an undue burden on residents that are just making minor improvements to their home. But I think that the process we have works and seems to cover what needs to be addressed. So, you know, I think that if there are changes and they meet the requirements of the ordinance, they would come in. If not, they just receive their building permits and go about their plans for making their changes.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. Mr. Sloan?
I don't think we need a new ordinance for design. People just need to go through the proper procedures through the city and through the planning commission. Last 3 years, I've attended almost every planning commission meeting, and I pushed to have the planning commission meetings videotaped so that the residents can see them. So if you are thinking of a kind of design change, you can check the agendas for the various planning commission meetings and take a look at the video. But I think we have a very good ordinance in place, and we have a very good planning commission, and they do a lot of hard work for the residents. And there's a congeniality that I see between the planning commission and the residents. If there's an issue, they want to try to work with the residents and tell them, go fix this or go attend to this and come on back and we'll talk to you again. And that's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. We'll begin the next question with Mr. Rozell. What is your opinion of the lawsuit involving Huntington Woods and the district court? Do you support it?
So when I was elected in 2015, the lawsuit was awaiting a word from the Supreme Court on whether or not they were going to take the appeal. Since that time, the Supreme Court, has taken the appeal, and we're now in negotiations for some type of settlement. I can't discuss legally, under state law, I can't discuss the terms of the proposed settlement, but I think I can say that very soon, hopefully, the residents of the city of Huntington Woods will be very happy with the outcome of that lawsuit. I'll leave it at that. The lawsuit is important, and I support it for two reasons. One, it involves taxpayer money, and two, it also deals with the bigger question of the court funding and the responsibility of the court funding, and coming to some kind of an agreement between Oak Park, Pleasant Ridge, Royal Oak Township, Huntington Woods, and the court as to how that funding will work. So do I support it? Yes. We need a very important answer to that question, and there's taxpayer money at stake here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. Mr. Sloan?
I have followed this lawsuit from the beginning against Oak Park. I've been to every hearing on this, to the Supreme Court, the Court of Appeals, and here in the Circuit Court. This has been going on since 2013. We have to be realistic. We lost in the Circuit Court. We lost in the Court of Appeals. The Supreme Court then sent it back to where it all started in the Circuit Court, and that trial is set for October 30th. Except we have accumulated nearly $100,000 in legal fees. What is the plan if we lose? We could owe hundreds of thousands of dollars to Oak Park. And I know the city will execute every angle to try to win this case, and I hope they do. However, I hope we don't miss out on early compromise opportunities.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. And Mr. Olsman?
Well, thank you. In 2012, the Supreme Court Administrative Office issued a report, and it advised the city of Huntington Woods that we had been inadvertently deprived of about $250,000 in revenue from the 45 District Court based upon the way they were calculating the fees on tickets. The way it works basically is it's 1/3, 2/3. So if the city of Huntington Woods writes a ticket, we get 1/3, and Oak Park, because it's where the court sits, where the judges sit, one of them's here tonight, has to get enough money to run their operation. That's state law. What was going on in that situation was Oak Park was adding on fees that were not agreed to and were not permissible. We talked to Oak Park. We tried to settle with Oak Park. Oak Park walked away from the table. That's why there was a lawsuit. We were joined with Pleasant Ridge in that case, and the Supreme Court didn't just send it back. The Supreme Court threw out the two prior adverse rulings from the circuit judge in the Court of Appeals and remanded the case. The matter is in a resolution state right now. We can't talk about it in specifics, but I am very confident that the residents of this city will applaud the results when it's over.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. We'll begin the next question with Mr. Sloan. What are the plans for Sam's Market? Do you support its redevelopment?
Well, the current plans are fairly well set. What has happened is the city bought the property for $250,000 about 4 years ago, and then they sold the property to a resident who was going to put a hair salon and other items in the building, and they sold it on land contract. As of May 1st last year, though, the resident bought out the land contract and received a deed that has been filed, and she obtained a rather large mortgage to establish the building and set it up. I feel that she is trying very hard to get that set up, and it will be fine. I do feel that the city should never have purchased that property in the first place. It should have just gone on to the public market and let the realtors and the real estate take care of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Mr. Olsman?
Oh, I could not disagree more. Sam's had fallen into a terrible state of disrepair. It was a blighted out structure. Alex Alley worked for years with the two brothers that owned it. The property, so you know, was originally given to the family that owned it by the city, I believe back in the 40s, because the city felt the need for a retail market in this area. And as competition increased and everything like that, obviously it became tougher to operate. I tried very hard to advocate condemnation of the property at one point. I was so concerned. I'm going to let you visualize what would happen if we just, quote, let Sam's go to the realtors, let Sam's go into foreclosure, let Sam's wind up on the block, let Sam's, really? I don't like that. I want to take charge of what's in our domain. We had the opportunity to buy Sam's at a very reasonable price. We bought it at a very reasonable price, and we sold it to a resident of the city that's got a magnificent plan for its redevelopment. The renderings for it are tremendous, and Liz DeRoven, we wish you the best of luck, and thank you very much for your contribution to our community.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. Mr. Rozell.
Thank you. When the city purchased Sam's, it was before my time on the commission, but shortly after coming on the commission, we had sold the market to the Huntington Woods resident and sold all of the equipment inside so that the city was almost made whole from the purchase and sale. One of the benefits, though, by the city temporarily holding ownership and now it transferring to a private citizen is it became uncapped. So we're collecting the maximum amount of taxes we can on that property. That's very good news. There's a sign out front now that talks about the hair salon, and it's my understanding a yoga, Pilates studio will also be in there. They have their building permits. They have all of their planning commission approvals. There's interior work being done right now. Sam's was a mess. The HVAC, the plumbing, the electrical needed a complete overhaul, and that takes time. And this resident is certainly working hard toward that outcome. And the renderings are great. I mean, once it's done, it will be certainly a gem on 11 Mile Road, and I'm looking forward to that day.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. We'll begin the next question with Mr. Olsman. And actually, there are two related questions, and so I'd like to give the people a 2-minute time limit on this. The first question is, how do you feel about the police department and their support of our community? And the second related question, do you support consolidating our public safety department with Berkeley or Oakland County?
Thank you very much. I think one of the reasons that Huntington Woods enjoys the property values that it does and the community, part of the keys of the success of Huntington Woods is public safety. If you go for a walk in our city at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's going to be a police car at some point near you. We've been very, very fortunate in terms of home invasion and things like that. We've had instances where the perpetrator was literally caught in the house at the time of the occurrence. Now, that's due to two things. That's due to a neighbor that's paying attention that reported it, and it's due to the fact that the police were there like that. So I am a very strong supporter of the Huntington Woods Police Department. I know these officers personally. It's 2 minutes, I think, isn't it? It's a 2-minute question. Thank you. I know all of these officers. Thank you. They're I can't say my name in 2 minutes. There's two. We know these officers personally. We engage with them on a regular basis. They're just tremendous. Chief Pazukowski has been a tremendous addition to our city and to our community. Joe and I have just received the endorsement of the Police Officers Labor Council, which is the bargaining unit for the patrol officers in Huntington Woods. And do I support consolidation with the city of Berkeley? Absolutely not. I have an office in Berkeley. I'm well acquainted with the police officers in the city of Berkeley. Terrific guys. Totally different. Berkeley's a different city than Huntington Woods. It's a different place than Huntington Woods. And I don't believe that the interests of our community would be served by consolidation with any other police department other than our own. We have a terrific police department, a terrific police chief, and I say we leave it just the way it is.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. Mr. Rozell.
Well, I've done a lot of door knocking in 2015 and a lot of door knocking in 2017. And one consistent message that I hear from residents is how much they appreciate our public safety department and our public safety officers. Whether it's welfare checks, whether it's them picking up a dead squirrel off of their front lawn, some of the things that these officers do go above and beyond what folks see in other communities. And it's a testament to the type of officers that we hire here. It's a testament to our police chiefs that we've had as far as training and whatnot. Our public safety department received an ISO rating of a 3. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is the best, nobody gets a 1, 10 is the worst. That is a direct impact on your insurance premiums that you pay on your homeowner's policy. When you get your renewal, it should list that ISO rating as a 3, down from a 5, because of the equipment and the training and the fact that this commission and our chief has made this a priority. So when we talk about consolidating, the answer is no. There was talk about going down this road in the past. The residents were overwhelmingly against it. My role up here is to be your representative. This is not about what I want. This is about what you want. And I have heard overwhelmingly that the folks want our own public safety department. And so I support maintaining that. And we did receive the endorsement of our Huntington Woods Patrol Officers Union and the Police Officers Labor Council as a direct testament to our ability to work with them cooperatively. And so the answer is no on consolidation.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. And finally, Mr. Sloan.
I've lived here 46 years, and I remember I got my driver's license at the police station on my birthday, day after Christmas. We went into the police station, and he took me on my driving test. They don't do that anymore. I certainly have extreme confidence in this police department. I know the Berkeley Police Department. I went to Berkeley High. I went to Norp Junior High at that time. I've always felt that the patrol officers were congenial, they were kind, and they were protective of us. And we need them separate, and the residents certainly feel a lot more secure when they know that they are our own officers. I have a very good relationship with Chief Pashikowski. We've talked about a number of issues, including parking for the Arts, Beats, and Eats, and perhaps limiting parking on York Street for a few days there so the residents can get about. So I find that they are very cooperative, they're very nice, they're very good, and they're helpful for the city, and they are valuable. And I certainly agree in the conclusion with the other two gentlemen that we will never combine our police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. We'll begin the next question with Mr. Rozell, and we'll go back to the 1-minute time limits then. Do you support increasing the size of the boards and commissions in the city? Well, it was similar. This is actually a different question. All right, I recognized it was similar, so I think we will actually just skip that one then. Do you feel the city is communicating better with its residents? How has this changed? And that's for Mr. Rozell.
Okay. I think that it has. Since being elected, I started holding Cup of Joe with Joe resident meetings in the basement of the library. And I don't do it because I like coffee. In fact, I don't drink coffee. But I do it because I like listening to what the residents have to say and addressing problems. I also created Commissioner's Corner, a cable television show that many of you may have seen, where I bring on department heads from the city, county officials, community leaders to talk about things that are important to you. And so those are two things that I have done personally to try to improve communication. As a commission, we've instituted a new emergency communications plan, Nixle, Dial My Calls. We have a weekly e-blast where we share information with residents about upcoming meetings, upcoming events in the city, news that's important. We also worked on revamping our website. And so we've done a number of things to try to improve communication, both routine and emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. Mr. Sloan.
I do feel the city has better communication with the residents since the flood in 2014. I have appeared before the city commission. I've gone to every city commission meeting in the last 3 years, and I have discussed at times communication issues, one being with the planning commission and videotaping. I do feel that there is better communication. We had an issue when we had the citywide power failure. We had no power for 6 days, and there was a bit of a communication problem because they did not open up the rec center for 3 nights for people who needed overnight. But I do feel that the city is continuing to improve the communication, and I feel our staff does a very good job.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Mr. Olsman.
When I was elected in 2009, some of you may recall what our city's website looked like at that time. Not exactly an award winner. I talked about it at length with our former city manager, Alex, with who I was very close and admired very much. He kept saying the same thing to me. There's no money and nobody cares. I said, Alex, we have a much different demographic today than we used to. They do care. He said, well, there's no money. We don't have 10 grand to spend on a website. So what happens? Along comes the flood in 2014. What did it expose? It exposed weakness in communication. Clearly, it did. The first thing we did after the flood, the mayor, Ron Gillum, Bob Paul, myself, and Jeff, and we set up a communications committee. We went to Paula Silver, we went to Brian Fenster, we went to people who are experts in communication, and they said, help us. And they did. Take a look at what we have today. Go on the website today. Look at Facebook, Pixel, all the other things we have to communicate with residents. It's 1,000% better than what it was.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. And, no, that's it then. All right, then the next question, we'll begin with Mr. Sloan. What civic organizations in the city do you belong to for support? I'm not quite sure what that means, but what organizations do you belong to and do you support in the city?
I'm a member of the Environmental Advisory Committee. I'm also a member of the Friends of the Library. I'm very involved in a number of other committees. I attend the BART board committees. I attend the Planning Commission meetings, and I attend all of the Senior Advisory Committee meetings, and that's a great, great group. And I also report to the Senior Advisory Committee once a month because I'm on the Oakland County Senior Advisory Council, and we are a liaison with the local senior advisory committees in five areas. And I share with them information such as prescription drug disposal so that we can get rid of them and not get into the wrong hands, and other issues, flu shots coming up, and I gain their support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Mr. Olsman.
I take the question to mean outside organizations, not committees within the city. So in terms of outside organizations that I'm very committed to, would be the Tri-Community Coalition, which is Judy Rubin's substance abuse prevention group aimed at young people through education. She's a tireless worker on behalf of the young people in our community to try to educate people, educate parents, educate kids on the real tragic consequences of substance abuse. Of course, right now it's the #1 topic because of the opioid crisis, but that's a whole other issue. But Judy's been a phenomenal advocate, and I've been proud to serve on her board and work with her. Also, the probably most philanthropic group in the history of municipalities is the Huntington Woods Men's Club, which has raised millions of dollars for the city over the years, and which I'm proud to be a member of and proud to support in any way that I can, through the golf outing, through the annual auction in the spring, and all the other events that they sponsor. It's a tremendous group, and we should be very proud of what they've done for our city. Take a look at Scotia Park. Take a look at Burton Park. Thank you, Huntington Woods Men's Club.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. Mr. Rozell.
Thank you. I joined the Huntington Woods Men's Club a few years ago, so I'm part of that organization. I also sit on the Community Coalition board with Commissioner Olsman. I'm a big supporter of the Berkeley Huntington Woods Youth Assistance Group, helping vulnerable young folks. I've been a supporter of the Berkeley Educational Foundation as well, and the Huntington Woods Women's League as far as supporting their annual home tour and being a donor to that effort, because I think it's important, the work that they do as well. I'm also a member of the Friends of the Library. We have a great library here and a very active Friends group, and so I'm proud to support and be part of the Friends group as well. Thank you.
All right, we'll begin the next question with Mr. Olsman. What are your priorities?
My priorities for the city at this point in time, number one is to finish the sewer mapping, because I think that is something that's always in the back of every resident's mind whenever it rains. And when we began that project, I told Mayor Gillum, this is the highest priority item. We have to move whatever we need to do around to address this problem, because people can't live with this. They just cannot live with the idea that every time it rains, they run down the basement to see if there's water coming up. So again, doing what we can do with it, we're doing it. So my priority is to finish that. My priority is to see to it that the road reconstruction project is completed. This was begun with the bond that was issued in 2009. We're going to probably have to go for additional bonding to finish all of the roads. But I think every resident I talk to, all they ask me is, when are you going to do my street? And I tell them I'm not a road builder. It's not my project. But I'm very anxious to see that completed. And I'd also like to see some attention focused on the city's parks, on the recreational equipment that's available, because we have so many young families in the city. I want to see to it that they have proper and safe equipment.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. Mr. Rozell.
Thank you. I think first and foremost, I think the sewer infrastructure is priority one. We're so close to the end of getting that report and being able to have a plan that we can use to move forward. So the sewer infrastructure is a big priority. I think the pension funding is probably priority two. And looking at that plan that we're working on to shore up our funding obligation. It's very important. It eventually could affect our credit rating, so I want to make sure that we address that. Lastly, I would say that I want to, and I've already begun discussions with our city manager as far as a green project, and that having all of our city buildings, if they can, operate off of renewable energy. And so we've begun discussions as far as very preliminary planning on that, and looking at ways to promote renewable energy and green infrastructure on municipal property. So those would be three priorities that I see moving forward over this next term. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. And Mr. Sloan.
My number one priority is flood control. When I talk to residents, I go door to door. Their number one concern is flood, is water, is coming into their basement, is concern. So I would like to attack it, and I've indicated earlier, by coming up with ways through our environment committee, with using environmental solutions and making them priorities to help people, residents, lessen the amount of water that would run off into the streets and then in your basement and then back up into your house. I think that's number one priority. And we need to look at pensions, sure. That's an important issue, and that's a financial issue. And I do agree with Mr. Rozell. Green infrastructure is very important today. There are a number of cities whose cities halls are getting close to 100% green green infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. We'll begin the next question with Mr. Rozell. What is your experience with city government?
Thank you. When I moved here, I knew this was the place that I wanted to live, and so I wanted to get involved. And I immediately signed up to be on the Planning Commission and was appointed and began serving on the Planning Commission and served my 6 years, sat out a year, and then received a call and said, hey, you know, the zoning board might be of interest. I filled out an application and was appointed to the zoning board. And so I've sat up here where you have to make tough decisions. I mean, the Planning Commission and the Zoning Board is a board where, you know, you're looking and decisions impact people. I think that those two boards are good training grounds to serve on the City Commission. I teach municipal finance at Oakland University, so I'm very in tune with that aspect of government and you know, what things we can do and creative things we can do to solve some of these financial issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. Mr. Sloan.
I'm a member of the government law section of the State Bar of Michigan, which deals with municipal and government legal areas. I've attended many seminars in municipal law. In my legal career, I've handled a number of ordinance issues and have worked with many city governments in legal and ordinance issues. I've read the entire municipal code here. It's about this big. And I'm quite familiar with all the issues. I've even found errors a few years ago that the city attorney had to correct. And I have watched this government. I have gone to every city commission meeting in 3 years. Every time they propose an ordinance, I check out that ordinance, I look at the old ordinance, and I look at the new ordinance. So I'm very involved, and I know how government works, and I'm very willing and ready to work with this government and help the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. And Mr. Olsman.
In 1998, I sent a letter to the city asking to be appointed to the ZBA, and I received a letter back appointing me to the Planning Commission. And at the time, I didn't know what the Planning Commission was or what they did. I soon found out that that's called having serious responsibility for other people's financial investments. Somebody wants to spend $100,000, $200,000, $300,000, whatever, $400,000, $500,000 on a project, and you're the person sitting on the Planning Commission that has to approve it. You have to go out, you have to look at the site, you have to look at the plans, you have to go out, stand there in the rain, in the snow, you have to look at the other houses around it to see if it is acceptable or within, you know, in terms of does it fit in and is it compatible with the other houses. I served on the ZBA and I've served on the City Commission for 8 years. I can tell you that anybody can join, any lawyer in the state of Michigan can join the municipal lawyers. You pay $40 and it's available to anybody that wants to join it. Experience comes from doing and from participating and from having responsibility, which I think I've demonstrated that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. We'll begin the next question with Mr. Sloan. Why are you running for office?
I've lived here my whole life, practically. I grew up on Henley at LaSalle. The only house facing Henley is a one-way street. I enjoyed living here. And then when I was starting my family and getting married, we moved back to Huntington Woods, so I have a total of 46 years. And I've always felt a strong attachment to the city. I've seen it grow since 1959 when I first came here. And in fact, when I was much younger, we used to come to visit people, and I remember the green space on Woodward Avenue. And I feel that I want to give to the city. I want to help the city. I want to work with the residents because it's the residents that are the value of the city.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Mr. Olsman.
In walking the city since the candidacy filing back at the end of July, Joe and I have talked to hundreds of residents, and the overwhelming response that we've received has really been terrific. The overwhelming number of people say to us, whatever you're doing, you keep doing it. We love our city. So I'm running for re-election because I believe we have a very effective city commission. I believe that I have made some significant contributions individually, but I will say this. There's no such word, no such letter in the word team. There's no I in the word team. The city commission is a body politic. We work together with one another. And I think right now, if you watch our city commission meetings and you see how people interact with one another, you would be, if you don't watch, you should. And when you do, you'll be very proud of the kind of city government we have. So I plan on staying and being a part of that and moving this city forward in a progressive manner.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. Mr. Rozell.
Thank you. I'm running because I care. We get $1 a year, so it's not for the money, I can assure you of that. I'm running because I care, and frankly, I feel I have something to offer. I feel that my background is beneficial, and I bring something to the table. And as Commissioner Olsman indicated, we do have a good team. We have a great, diverse group of people from different backgrounds that compromise and work together at every meeting. And the primary focus is what is in the best interest of the residents, period. And that's the environment that we operate in, and that's why I'm running again. And as I've been door knocking, talking to residents in the hot and in the cold, when we had a little bit of a cold spell, it's motivating to hear the positive responses and how folks feel about their city government and their city commission. And that's why I do this, because I feel like I'm making a difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. We'll begin the next question with Mr. Olsman. What experience and qualities make a good city commissioner?
I think that one key characteristic or key quality that a person needs to have is the ability to compromise. You have to be able to look at what another commissioner wants to do and why they want to do it, decide whether or not you favor it, and as Joe just said, look at what's in the best interests of the community. That's the only thing here is the city of Huntington Woods and the residents. I have extensive experience in organizations. I think that the ability to work together to accomplish a common goal is the reason our city is as successful as it is. So I think it's the ability to compromise, it's the ability to call somebody else up and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? So you truly understand what the other person wants, and also to reach out to other residents to see what they think about whatever an issue may be that you're going to discuss. The key is communication, listening, and compromise.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. Mr. Rozell.
You have to be a good listener, no question about it. And you have to like being part of a team, because, you know, hurling out accusations or insults or stomping your feet will make you a very ineffective commissioner. This is about working together and compromising and listening to residents and listening to your colleagues that sit up here once or twice a month and coming to the best possible outcome for the residents. I think that, again, good experience is someone who has served on a board or commission that, you know, a planning commission, a zoning board, somebody that has made those tough decisions in the past, I think makes for good experience. And, you know, I'm proud to bring my municipal finance experience. We have a great finance director, Mr. Tony Lehman, and, you know, we've worked together on a number of projects, and I think that that's also valuable to have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. And Mr. Sloan.
Qualities of a good commissioner. Number one, be a good listener. Listen to your residents. Number two, inform your residents. Let them know what's going on. Don't keep anything private or secret. Everything should be open invite residents to your table. A commissioner should be very informative and congeal, and also be able to work with other commissioners, of course. The we need is to have compromises. That's how legislation gets through. That's how ordinance gets through sometimes. But sometimes you have to stick up for what you feel is right. So I feel a commissioner must have values and must connect with the residents and let them know what's going on.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. And our final question, which we'll begin with Mr. Rozell on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being best, how would you rate the city?
All right, I'll give us a 9. There's always room for improvement. Look, I think in talking with the residents, and it's not more important what I think, it's more important what you folks think, to be totally honest with you. And that's what matters to me. And what I've heard as I've knocked on doors is that a lot of folks are happy with the city. And so I would equate that to about a 9. We are still working on making improvements and working together to further the city's goals. But I really think that we have a good group that functions in a very congenial and team atmosphere. And so I'm proud to say that I would give us a 9 out of 10. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. Mr. Sloan?
I would probably go with a 9.1.
Thank you.
You're quite welcome. I think the survey, I think we need a survey of the residents. I think it's something, I don't know, we haven't had this in a while. Let's have a survey of the residents, see what you like, see what you think could be improved, talk about all the different aspects of the city. And I think it's time to look at that and get a refreshing idea of how people feel, because it's those 6,300 people who make up the quality, who make up the 9.1 reputation of our city.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. And Mr. Olsman?
Thank you very much. I would give our city a 12, is what I would give our city, because I know from seeing and talking with mayors in other cities, I know from talking with Mayor Duggan, with an at length with an alderman in Chicago and things like that, even though they're much bigger, as the alderman told me, bigger city, bigger problem, same problem, just on a larger scale. So I think we have an extremely functional city government in our city. We have a tremendous finance director. We have tremendous police protection. We have tremendous recreation. How about Burton School? Anybody want to talk about Burton School and the value that that has to our community? How about all the people that contribute? How about the Boy Scouts? How about the Men's Club? I mean, are you kidding? What kind of city we have here is amazing. It's amazing. It's at least a 12. And you see what other people say about us. Look at go on Google, Huntington Wood best of lists. Caldwell Banker, top 10, Forbes, top 9, all best places, best suburbs to live in America, safest cities. So other people have seen what we see. We're at 12.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. That concludes our questions and answers. We'll have closing statements now in reverse order to the order of the opening statements. So we'll begin with Mr. Sloan.
2 years ago, I knocked on a lot of doors when I ran for mayor. People didn't know me then, yet I received almost 1,100 votes. This time, as I knock on the doors, it's a lot slower now, because people are sharing a lot of their ideas and concerns and what they would like to see in the city. They know I'm listening, and they know that I am talking for them. I have built a lot of trust, and I am thankful for that. And I ask you for your vote for commissioner on the November 7th ballot. And we'll see you at the Burton Fun Run on Friday.
Thank you, Mr. Sloan. Mr. Rozell.
Thank you. We've had some really great questions this evening, and I'd once again thank the League for organizing this forum. I made a series of promises to you in 2015. I hope tonight you've seen that I've kept those promises. Improving communication, investing in our sewer infrastructure, tackling water rates, addressing our pension funding obligations. Despite leading the county in property value increases, having an excellent credit rating, being ranked as one of the top 10 best places to live in the country and one of the safest places to live in Michigan, we still have work to do. I am committed to continuing to work tirelessly as your city commissioner, and I will never forget the trust that you placed in me. I ask for your vote to continue to serve as your voice on the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rozell. And finally, Mr. Olsman.
About a year ago, our mayor, Bob Paul, and myself and our city manager met with Mayor Duggan at his office in Detroit to talk about Rackham and the problem with the contractor and our desire to maintain the golf course in a better condition. And he said to me, I've known Mayor Duggan for many years. He said, so how's your city commission? I said, well, actually, we have about a 98% unanimous voting record. And he looked at me and he said, how's that even possible? Knowing what he and how the Detroit City Council functions, I said, Mr. Mayor, when people listen to one another and they give thoughtful consideration to what the other person is thinking and what they want to do, and they're all on the same page in terms of acting in the best interests of the community, guess what? You come to a great consensus in the best interests of the city, and we all like each other. That's critically important, and get along. We have the endorsement of all of the public officials, Joe and I do, including 4 people who ran for the city commission in the past. So we're honored to have those endorsements. We ask for your vote, Joe and I do, so that we can continue to do what I believe is a very effective job of helping to make the city of Huntington Woods the kind of city we all want to live in.
Thank you, Mr. Olsman. The League of Women Voters thanks the audience, the candidates, and Huntington Woods TV for making this forum possible. This forum was broadcast live tonight and will be rebroadcast 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, and 7 o'clock at night, from now until Election Day. For further nonpartisan information on these candidates, check the League website for our voter guide. That website is LWVOA, which stands for League of Women Voters Oakland Area.org. The League of Women Voters is funded by contributions from concerned businesses and citizens. Our membership is open to men and women over the age of 16. Remember to vote on November 7th. Democracy is not a spectator sport. Thank you and good evening.
Joe? Jules?